So with those logistics out of the way, I'll move on with introducing our presenter. Randy Brooks is a professor and extension forestry and fire specialist for the University of Idaho. Randy received his BS degree in forest management from Oklahoma State University and his MS and PhD degrees in forest science from Michigan Tech University. Randy's research currently focuses on logger and wildland firefighter health and safety. Randy is also a board member of the Northern Rockies Fire Science Network. So with that, I'll hand this over to you, Randy. Thank you so much for being here today, and go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Megan. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this very important topic. This work on fatigue and sleep applies to all of us, not just wildland firefighters. As I've gone through this, a lot of this I've been able to apply in my own life and those around me. I appreciate everyone tuning in today. I see we have a lot of folks from every region of the United States, as well as Canada and Australia. So I'm humbled that you've taken the time out of your busy schedules to listen in today. And I'm having difficulties. There we go. As Megan mentioned today, today's topic is assessing wildland firefighter sleep and fatigue on the fire line. Also have Callie Collins, who is my graduate student, as a co-author on this. And she's working on one aspect of this study. Her MS thesis was actually a pilot study and contains most of what's mentioned here today. Now she's working on a PhD with a widely expanded group of wildland firefighters. And we're also, as Megan mentioned, working with loggers as well, who happen to have the deadliest occupation on a per capita basis, with similar sleep hygiene or sleep habits to that of wildland firefighters. But today we're going to focus on wildland firefighters. And this paper is soon to be published, so watch for that very soon. And I've teamed up with one of the top sleep experts, and I'll mention later, in the international community, who's been working with Olympic athletes as well. And you'll see later on why sleep is so important to not only our Olympic athletes, but the population in general. So what am I going to go over today? First, I've got just a few acknowledgments that I want to mention, and then I'll give you a brief introduction on why I got into this very important topic. And then we did a survey that started this whole thing off. And I'll give you a little bit about sleep and fatigue and the background on some of the research findings that have been found on sleep and fatigue and how it affects us physiologically, mentally, and so forth. Then I'll give you a little bit of my research findings. And because this is applied research, I want to talk a little bit about, give you, the practitioners, some what I call best management practices. So what can we do to get a better night's sleep? As I've been working with loggers and wildland firefighters across the West, they always want to know, what can I do, Randy? What can I do, Randy? So I've got a list there for you. Then I'll give you a summary, and we'll have time for questions at the end, and I'll try to answer all those, but I'll let you know up front, I don't have all the answers yet. This topic is, I like to say, it's like an onion, and we have to peel away a lot of layers to get to the core of it. So that's why we continue to do research and just keep digging deeper on this. But first of all, I want to acknowledge the Northern Rockies Fire Science Network for having me be a part of this. And also Dr. Stephen James at WSU Sleep Performance Lab. Steve is the one that got me turned on to the type of work that we're doing right now, and with the fatigue science ready bands, and I'll go into more detail later. Then I want to acknowledge the Forest Service, Idaho Department of Lands, Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Indian Affairs, for not only their support, their financial support and mental support, but also our wildland firefighters. And then we've got a pretty good cohort of fire ecology students here that are wildland firefighters, and all those that have been participating in our research. And then I'd lastly want to thank Fatigue Science and InBody for donating equipment and monies as well to this research program, as well as our Region 1, 4, and 6 health and safety personnel. They've really been encouraging to me to conduct this research, and we just did a webinar a couple of weeks ago that I'll tell you where to go to that at the end. But anyway, so how did this all get started? How did Randy Brooks get involved in wildland firefighter research? Well, it all started in August 2015. Actually had 2 sons and a son-in-law and 2 cousins that were fighting wildland fire that year. But I think we all know what happened on that particular day over near Twist, Washington. We had an unfortunate incident where 3 young men perished, and you can see Daniel Lyons there, the picture on the right. Daniel actually happened to survive that. I do have his permission. I've been talking with him on the phone, and I've spent several nights. We set up all one night talking about this, and he's been very encouraging as well. But it's because of him that, and actually should mention, one of the young men that perished was going to start his master's degree under me that fall. And that, coupled with the fact I had 2 sons fighting fire, you know, I've got skin in the game, so to speak. So this hits close to home for me. And you can imagine what was going on with my family at the time. One of my sons was at Twisp. Another son was on another fire in Idaho. And once they heard that some lives have been lost, you can imagine word travels fast across the agencies. And my other son was up in arms trying to figure out if his brother was okay, what was going on. But anyway, so as I mentioned, after this happened, I had an undergrad working for me in exercise science, Callie Collins. And I can remember specifically talking to her the day after the incident. We were having coffee, and we got to wondering what was going on. What were the reasons for some of these accidents? And at that point, I decided to take her on, given her background in exercise physiology. I decided to take her on as a grad student and start looking at what the whys might be. Why were things happening? Why were accidents and fatalities happening on the fire line? The first thing we did was take a look at, well, just how many fatalities are happening and what's the main cause. Here you can see some data from NISI compiled and formatted by Wildfire Today. And we have medical, aircraft, and vehicular accidents all right up there at the top, along with entrapment, as the leading causes of these wildland firefighter fatalities. And one of the things that sticks out to me is the medical. And we were wondering, and I've talked to groups, you know, I've given this talk a few times around the West, but we're wondering, this still remains to be determined, why are a seemingly fit population having a high incident of these cardiovascular events? And that's a good topic, but it's a topic for another day. So we also got to we're still looking at the background on fatalities, accidents, things like that. And it's not just isolated to one area. As you can see from this map here, here's fatalities from 2006 or 2007 to 2016. And you can see it's spread all across the United States. So we also found this data, again from NIFC, compiled by wildfiretoday.com. And we look at this trend, and it's actually kind of alarming. Wildland fire fatalities in the United States from 1960 to 2015. Take a look at that, and you can see that trend is on the upward. It's on an upward trend, and this is discomforting and alarming to me. So we look at that, but we also, as you know, over here in Idaho, we have a fire ecology degree, and so we've got a heck of a team over here doing research in fire ecology. And so some of the research they found, this was published in 2015, you can see the graphic on the right shows the early fire season start dates in blue, and then the late fire season start dates in the red. And if you look at that, our fire season since the early 80s has grown by almost 30 days. And that's going to be an upward trend. So if you could see, I've got my cursor here, the table on the left, and you can see some of the things they looked at was growing season length. And per decade, it's supposed to get about 4 days longer. And as we look at the graph here on the right, this is actually happening. Our mean annual temperature is getting warmer. The area burned is going to get greater, and we've seen that in the last, since 2015, we've had the biggest fires in the United States. In the bigger fires, more acres burned than we've ever had. The other thing, look here, you can see this late fire season start date, 9.2 days later. So we're actually going to see our fire season looks to continue to get longer and longer every year. And let's look at California. That's a great example of what's happened in the last 2 seasons. We've seen big fires in California all the way into December. And some of the fire people tell me, are we even going to have an end to the fire season anymore? And unfortunately, a longer fire season provides more opportunities for injuries and fatalities of wildland firefighters. And it also, this longer fire season may cause more physical and mental fatigue to set in, especially towards the end of the fire season, which may, we don't know, but it may be contributing to accidents or fatalities on the fire line. Now, let's put those two graphics side by side here, and I think you can start to see the picture that's developed here. And I think we can see some potentially alarming outcomes. I say potential, we don't ever know what's going to happen. But we've got the fatalities on the increase, the fire season is increasing in length, and I think that just might be a recipe for something we don't really want to think about, but we need to start addressing. So that leads us up to the study. Like I said, my grad student and I sat down and looked at this. So we come up with this study rationale. Accidents, we know, are a notable occurrence in wildland firefighting. And from 2005 to 2015, the United States alone lost 176 wildland firefighters. And we're just under 18 losses per year. And if we look at the reported accidents, and remember, not all these slips, trips, and sprains get reported, but those are averaging about 42 a year. So what we did, we sat down and decided to, in order to assess conditions that may be affecting wildland firefighter health and safety, we conducted an online survey in the winter of 2016 and 2017. We ended up with 428 responses, and that was pretty good. We had responses from all the zip code areas in the United States, as well as Canada and Australia. Additionally, 198 of these folks provided their names, telephones, and email addresses asking to be participants in this survey. So we were pretty excited about what we found. So some of the demographics of the survey, you can see we reached almost every type of wildland firefighter there is. A lot of engine bosses, a lot of type 2s, engine crews, hand crews, hot shot, helitack, FMOs, and smoke jumpers. And we looked at their average season was 12 years, and the respondents had worked from 1 to 41 years. Average age 17 or 35.8 years, with the age range of 17 to 68. We had 349 males, 73 females. So we thought with this broad array of respondents, we'd get some pretty good answers. So some of the things we found, again, these are self-reported, but we asked them what were contributing accidents, what was contributing to accidents and fatalities on the fire line. 26% of them said they had been distracted due to thirst. 19% said they had been distracted due to hunger. We also asked them about hydration and nutrition. 35% reported that they rarely monitored the food consumed. And you can see a picture on the right here is a picture of one of the lunches that one of our participants sent in to us via text message. We also asked them about water consumption. And water consumption, again, self-reported here, take it with a grain of salt, but they said they were averaging about a gallon plus or minus a half a gallon of water a day. Now, here's the thing that we really wanted to start looking at. They reported sleeping an average of 6.4 plus or minus 1.4 hours in a 24-hour period during the fire season. Then we asked them specifically while they were on an active fire assignment, how much sleep they were getting. And that averaged 5.2 hours a night, plus or minus 1.3 hours. And then we asked them, what do you think are the common factors contributing to accidents and fatalities on the fire line? 79% of them, the biggest majority of them, said fatigue, physical fatigue, tired, being tired from manual labor, long days of work. 73% said mental fatigue from a long fire season. And then almost 70% said inadequate sleep due to long shifts or travel. And then 61% said inadequate sleep due to other factors, such as a lot of them mentioned getting camp crud, not being able to sleep. A lot of them mentioned the banging out house doors, the guy in the tent next to him, the person in the tent next to him was snoring, those kind of things. So having taken a look at that, then after the survey, we started asking ourselves again, so why are these accidents happening? Are they sheer coincidence? And then given this, the fatigue and sleep, we got to wondering, does sleep or fatigue play a factor in this? And the first thing we needed to find out, what causes fatigue? So when we say fatigue, we're talking about the fatigue that's caused by poor or inadequate sleep versus physical fatigue. We've all had physical fatigue. We've worked hard all day long. Physical fatigue can actually become overcome by quality sleep quality, sleep quantity. The fatigue we're talking about is known as cognitive fatigue, and that's what leads to reduced alertness, reduced reaction times, and impaired decision making on the job. And I'm going to go into a lot of detail on these later on. But here's what the research says. Fatigue is a substantial safety issue. It's a substantial cognitive impairment. That means we lose our ability to focus. And when that happens, we lose our situational awareness. And this, we'll put 2 and 2 together here later. But the research also shows 7 to 14 days with poor sleep or lack of sleep is going to take us about 3 days of recovery with about 8 hours sleep. And I've got some good slides I'll show you later on that actually can demonstrate this, how much sleep it actually does take for us and wildland firefighters to recover. Now, fatigue and job performance. This has been studied ad nauseum, but research shows that occupational injuries are 61% higher with overtime. 61% higher with overtime. How many of you out there have been on the fire line and have worked a ton of overtime? I hear about that a lot. 12-hour days, working 12-hour days shows there's a 37% increase in the hazard rate. 60-hour weeks show that there's a 23% not only in work-related injuries, but work-related illnesses. And I'll talk about why lack of sleep can lead to some illnesses. We'll see here in a little bit. In 2016, a study came out, and there's been an awful lot of research with Department of Transportation looking at automobile accidents. But in this particular year, they attributed over 100,000 automobile accidents to fatigue driving. There were 1,357 fatalities and 71,000 injuries as a result of fatigue driving. Fatigue, I'll go on here, also affects our personal well-being. The research shows constant chronic fatigue has a lot of health risks. It leads to depression, it leads to alcoholism, it leads to drug abuse, or can lead to drug abuse, and can lead to obesity. We'll touch on those briefly here in a little bit. Now, we've all heard this. Lack of sleep mimics blood alcohol concentration. How many of us worked an 18-hour day in the woods or on the fire line? Well, I know I have. And you look at the research, 18 hours without sleep, that's the equivalent of a 0.05% blood alcohol concentration. If we go on up to 24 hours without sleep, that's 0.10%. 21 hours without sleep, that's like being legally drunk in all states. There's been just a ton of research that shows how correlated fatigue and lack of sleep are with blood alcohol concentrations. Okay, so what are some of the physical functions that are affected by inadequate sleep? Research has time and time again showed anything less than 8 hours of sleep decreases our time to physical exhaustion by 10 to 30%. I'm going to talk about athletes and what this can mean later on. It decreases our aerobic output. It decreases or leads to impairments in cardiovascular, metabolic, respiratory, all of our physiological functions that's going on. It leads to faster rates of lactic acid buildup. And that's that lactic acid that's produced in your muscles and builds up during intense exercise. And it leads to soreness. A lot of us have probably had that happen to us. And then lastly, it affects the body's ability to sweat during physical exertion. Now imagine being out there, you've got a lack of sleep, you're wearing all your PPE, and you need to be able to sweat, especially in the heat of the summer. Some other things. Research has shown that less than 1 week of sleep curtailment in healthy young individuals, healthy young people, is associated with changes in metabolic and endocrine functions, leading to decreased carbohydrate tolerance. And one of the first brain functions that buckles, even under the slightest amount of sleep deprivation, is concentration. And when you're out there on the fire line, if you're a sawyer, if you're a logger, you're working around any equipment, we need to be able to concentrate. And it also leads to lower work production. And our athletes, especially our Olympic athletes, this has been studied a lot, and they found this out. Those that are sleep impaired have less work production. And here's one I want to mention. Chronic lack of sleep across the season predicts a massively higher risk of injury in athletes. I want to repeat that. Chronic lack of sleep across the season predicts a massively higher risk of injury in athletes. And for those of you that are wildland firefighters out there, and those others have heard this expression, we consider wildland firefighters as tactical athletes, and they need to be treating themselves as such. So I've already mentioned it decreases our cognitive performance, our ability to understand, be aware of what's going on around us. It impairs our visual function, our tracking time. Research time and time again shows that when we follow those in a lab that are being eye monitor tracking, it decreases the reaction time as well. And it also increases, I mentioned earlier, work-related illnesses and injuries. And a major consequence of a lack of concentration due to sleep deprivation is in the form of drowsy driving. If you've never read any of Matthew Walker's research on sleep, he's one of the gurus in sleep research. I'd recommend that you look him up with some of the stuff he's been doing out of California. Okay, routinely less than 6 hours of sleep. And you can see this. I was in Portland over the weekend. There's a billboard sign there on the right. You can see solving the national sleep debt crisis. Sleep debt is what we refer to as if you don't get your 8 hours of sleep over the course of the week, you're going to accumulate sleep debt, and that's going to lead to fatigue, as we'll be able to show later. It affects our immune system. As a matter of fact, kind of as a side study, we've been tracking bartenders who work late at night with some of our research. These guys get little sleep, 3 to 4 hours of sleep every night, and in particular, they're always sick, they're always ill. It affects our immune system. Research shows that it more than doubles our risk of cancer. It's a major factor in Alzheimer's disease. It increases our stress hormones, cortisol. It makes you hungrier, ghrelin, which is one of those hormones produced by the body that can make us hungry. And then it causes coronary artery blockage, cardiovascular disease, stroke, congestive heart failure. So you're starting to get the picture now of what inadequate sleep can do for us. This was literally, I say this tongue in cheek, an eye opener when we started looking at all the research out there that had been taking place on inadequate sleep. Sleep has a huge role on performance. Sleep quality predicts the gradual return of our motor functions. That's our tracking ability. Sufficient sleep offers significant improvement to our motor skill memory. And then it accelerates physical recovery from common inflammation. When we work out all day, you're out on the fire line, swinging Pulaski, running a chainsaw, you're going to have inflammation, and that's just common. But adequate sleep helps us recover from that. And as a result, it stimulates muscle repair and helps reduce muscle fatigue. It also restores cellular energy in the form of glucose and glycogen. That's a topic for another day. And then has the benefit of restoring perceived energy. We wake up, we feel fresh. So benefits of the sleep, just as to rehash this, services the brain and body. It prevents fatigue. It enhances our ability to learn, memorize, and make decisions. And I say that because there's been a lot of research conducted on college students. College students like to pull all-nighters for their exams. This pulling all-nighters is probably one of the worst things they can do because their ability to memorize and make decisions is prohibited. And it also affects our psychological health. I mentioned earlier, lack of sleep can lead to depression. It recalibrates our brain circuits. Some of these neuroscientists have been looking at this, understand the value of being able to sleep, because dreams are what we consider a consoling neurochemical bath. We have to dream. It's just part of our system. And then it restocks our immune system as well. It helps fight malignancy. It helps prevent infection and wards off sickness. And then it helps reform the metabolic state in our bodies, and so forth and so on. I think you can start to see the picture now, the benefits of sleep or not. So that leads us up to some of the work I've been doing for the last 3 years. And we've been looking at wildland firefighters that are willing to participate in this sleep study. We got about 60 of them right now that are participating in our sleep research. And just to give you the formal statement, they're given a plain language statement, informed consent, and revocation of consent form to sign prior to participation. We do have permission from the Forest Service all the way up to top in DC to conduct this kind of research. So how have we been collecting sleep data? We've been doing it with actigraphy, and we call these sleep ready bands, and it looks just like a Fitbit. It's an unintrusive device worn on the wrist. It has a long battery life. It's rechargeable, and it works through actigraphy, where accelerometers track movement. And I'll show you graphics of how this thing works in just a second. There's a picture of it there on the right. And these things, the ones we have, the new generation that are out this year, actually have, you can see this, they come out of the band right here, and it's got a USB charger. You can just slip that into any phone charger. We give them these little portable battery packs that you'd use to charge your cell phone, so they can actually take these out in the field, pop this thing out, charge it, and the charge will last. We've had the one I've been wearing has been lasting for about 40 days, and it can record up to 90 days worth of data. We had one of our participants spent close to 3 months down in Texas last year, and she was able to come back, and we downloaded all of her data with no problem. So it can keep a good battery life as well as store a lot of data. So it processes the data via algorithms, and it uses the sleep activity and task effectiveness model that was developed by the US Army Research Lab. And it's been validated as the most accurate by the Standards of Practice Committee of the American Sleep Academy and Sleep Medicine. Now I've got a little asterisk there, and I say most accurate, and that's for field observations, polysomnography, taking someone into the lab, hooking them up with all these scientific instruments, electrodes on their head and whatnot. That's the gold standard here. These again have been validated as the most accurate, and they are USD approved for research. So this is what we've decided to go with. From this data, from this algorithm and the safety model, the company is able to calculate the quality as well as the quantity of sleep during the night, as well as activity levels during the day. And these activity levels are something we can touch on later on. But and this safety alertness model, I'll just back up one here, that you see right here, sleep activity and task effectiveness model, the safety model. So what this safety model does is it actually gives us a score from 0 to 100. And I tell my participants, and all of my college students get this, it's like being back in school. If your alertness score, which is a fatigue rating, if your alertness score is 90 to 100, hey, you're getting an A, you're doing good. But once we get down, you see right here, below 70, even in the 80s. You can see down here, that's where we start to see fatigue impairment. When we're in the 70s, our reaction time is slowed by 25%. And when we're below 90, when we're in the 80s, our reaction time is slowed by 11%. Now, when we get down here, this is like a stoplight. Green is good, green is go, red is not, red is stop. And so we get down here, we can see that below 60, your reaction time can be slowed by 67%. So, and at that point, when I tell the college students, you're failing, and we'll get into more of that as well here. So we look at this on a graph. This is some of the data that we can actually see. The wildland firefighters can't see this data. We can only see this back home at the computer. But this graphic here on the left, here's one of our participants, and I've done some redaction here, but you can see that this is for up here, the month of July. Month of July, if you can follow my cursor here. This individual is floating along in the about 80, 90. And then all of a sudden you can see on July 17th, this individual's alertness score dropped to 37.8%. And that's in the red. And then, so we look at this person actually flew to Alaska to a fire on July 10th, spent a week up there. And so he spent his whole time in a reduced state of alertness. So we go over here to the right, and this is what we actually see. Here's the uploads. This is June 9th to September 6th. You can choose the dates. You can see that the individual spent 2.6% of their time in the low. That's 60 to 70%. Their reaction time is reduced by 55% with a blood alcohol concentration equivalent of greater than 0.08. Legally, that's the legal limit. And then look at this, risk of accident or serious error, very high. So what I want to do, I've got an analogy I like to use. This individual spends 2.6% of their time in the low alertness zone with a reaction time reduction of 55%. So I've been taking boxing lessons for a while now, and I like to use this analogy. I'm sparring or I'm in the ring with someone, and if my reaction time is slowed by half or more, what are the chances my opponent's going to catch me with a jab or a hook or an uppercut? Well, pretty good if my reaction time's cut in half. Now, for those of you out there that are wildland firefighters or foresters or loggers, imagine you're out in the woods working and a rock comes rolling down the hill, or a tree you're cutting has the top or branch come down. What's the likelihood, if your reaction time is decreased by half, what's the likelihood that you could get hit versus when you're fully alert and good to go? And with loggers and firefighters, they're constantly working around moving equipment, and they need to remain vigilant. So that's some of the interesting stuff, or at least what I find extremely interesting, that we're able to get out of these fatigue science ready bins. Here's an individual that Monday, June 12th, you can see right here, the gray, the light gray square bar here, the individual's asleep. And then this is the actigraphy. This is the motion that these fatigue science ready bands that are worn on the wrist are able to track. This individual pulled an all-nighter, and you can see that after 24 hours, they're in the red. They're in a decreased state of alertness. And so you can see here, the person actually got a nap, still in the red, and then they got 8.5 hours, almost 9 hours of sleep here, and they were able to recover a little bit. But let me switch over. That's the graphic form. Here's another way of looking this as a graph. So this person, June 12th, pardon me, pulled an all-nighter, turned around, that was a Monday, then on a Saturday pulled another all-nighter, 2 all-nighters in a row. And you can see it, that person was able to recover. By the way, this little line right here, I failed to mention, this is the average of the group that we've been monitoring. That's their average. And you can see that this person drugged the whole average down right here and then right here as well. So we're able to look at this as an average. And then you can see later on in August, the person was up late, and also their reaction time is reduced. So we look at that, then here's that when this person pulled the all-nighter. You can see we're able to look at sleep quantity. Here's their average alertness. That's that 0 to 100. Anything above 80 or 90, excuse me, we're doing well. So you can see this person's average over this amount of time was 7.3 hours. And Friday got 8.2 hours, Saturday 8.7, doing pretty good. Sunday 6.6, Monday 0 hours. And we can also see, so that's their sleep quantity. Just that one night, they dipped down below 70. But the next night, this is a great case study here, by the way, they get 9.5 hours sleep and then 8.8. So they're able to recover above 90 with a couple of good nights sleep. But then look here, Saturday, another all-nighter, and then get 7.5 hours sleep. So they got dropped from 90 to 67 with no sleep. And then they get 6.5 hours sleep. They get up to 80, 6.5. So they're not recovering as fast here as they did up here with over 8 hours of sleep. So I think you can begin to see the picture of what we're able to collect with this data. With these ready bands. So quantity, we can look at how many awakenings they have per hour, how many total awakenings in the night. And here's the important thing, wake after sleep onset. So once you fall asleep and you wake up, we take these total awakenings here. How long? So this person actually woke up 10 times for a little over an hour and 15 minutes. So this is the data we're able to collect from this. Sleep onset, we can tell when they go to sleep, when they go to bed, and as well as when they wake up. So this is what it looks like. You have to have, I should have mentioned early on, once we pair these things up with a person, it takes about 4 to 5 days, 4 to 5 nights for these to calibrate to a person, because it has to get used to the individual, because this is measuring motion. And I know for Randy Brooks, I move a lot, toss and turn at night. And so if I were to take my band and just strap it on someone that just sleeps on their back all night long, they'd begin to wonder what's going on. But anyway, so it takes about 4 days to calibrate to you and your motion. So these, how do these work? Well, the Ready Band that you wear on your wrist collects the data, and then we have an iPad turned on all the bases where we're collecting this data from, and you can see it has to be turned on to this Fatigue Science app. And here is, you can see, we can see when the batteries need charged, last time they actually synced, or when the person was in the base. And you can see most of these, here's one that's at 63%. But so that's what we're able to look at. That's what you see on the iPad there. And then I get emails and it'll say, hi Randy, one of your Ready Bands needs to be charged soon. So it was this one at 6%. And when I went to look at that thing, and it was actually syncing. So it'll tell you right then and there that it synced and what day it synced. This is another, so we can specify the date range. I can look at an individual 14-day roll on a person. I can look at their entire summer. This was June 9th to September 6th. You can see, again, the same one I showed earlier. They only spent 66% of their time in that high alertness zone. 28% is in the reduced, where the reaction time slowed by 18%, but typically, realistically, there's really no blood alcohol concentration correlation, and then risk of accident or serious error is low. But when we get down in here, as we see with our individuals and collectively as a group, that's where the concerns begin. And so what we actually see here, here's new uploads. We have to go through there and check to see if an individual takes the watch, the Ready Band off to charge it, then it's set still and it doesn't pick up any motion, and it might think you're asleep. So we have to go through and verify all the data. So it's pretty time consuming. But let's look at some actual data here. Let's jump into the nuts and bolts of this. This is a group, an average alertness scores of one of the groups we looked at in the fire season 2017. And we look at overall. So we actually looked at overall when they were off fire and then when they're on fire. And this as a whole, they only spent 55% of their time in that high state of alertness. On fire, so that's the average. On off fire, I should say, they were almost at 70%. And 25% of their time was in a reduced state of alertness, and then 6% in the reduced as well. So on fire, this is where it gets really cool in my mind. Only 34% of the time were they in a high state of alertness. 54% of their time they were in reduced. Then we look at here, 3.6 over 4% of their time they're in the red zone. And that's where they've got that reduced state of alertness. They have that blood alcohol equivalency of technically over the limit. And so that's, like I said, pretty interesting data here. This is the actual, we just look at the average for June, July, August, and September, the average hours the combined group slept. And we can break these down individually. I don't have time today to go through it all. Like I said, we've got a publication coming out here really quick, but for June, they slept 7.3 hours average collectively as a group. July, that dropped down to 6.5, August, 6.6, September, 7.2. And as you know, the CDC says we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And so this group is getting, especially right here on average, they're getting less than that recommended amount of sleep. So that's sleep quantity, the amount. Let's look at quality. So their average sleep duration on fire versus off fire. So you see off fire, the group was only averaging 6.8 hours a night versus on a fire, they're averaging 6.2. And this was significantly different. So they're getting significantly less sleep on fire versus off fire. And then we look at their sleep onset. They're still going to bed at about the same time, 22:40 versus 22:30. They're actually getting to sleep a little bit earlier when they're on fire. But look at the wake up time. And we haven't done these data sets are just tremendous. We haven't actually looked at wake up time, but you can see there's an hour difference in there on fire. Here's the interesting thing. This is what kind of threw me for a loop when we first started looking at this data. Off fire, average wake after sleep onset. I mentioned earlier that that's the amount of time that you're awake after you fall asleep and before you wake up. We can see off fire, our folks are averaging about 44 minutes awake. On fire, that drops significantly to 31 minutes. And then our average sleep latency, that's the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep. Off fire, they were averaging 26 minutes versus on fire, 17 minutes. That's significantly different. So sleep quality actually went up. That means it got better on fire, even though they're getting their sleep quantity is less. And when we started querying the group, they're just, hey, Randy, we're just dead dog tired at the end of the day and we just pass out. So they're getting less sleep, but they're falling asleep faster. Okay, so I mentioned we have a fire degree program here at the U of I, and we've got, I don't know how many of our students are actually wildland firefighters during the summer, and we've got these bands on, probably 20 of them right now. But we sent a group of 10 of them down to Florida over spring break as one of our classes, and they did a prescribed burn, and they actually pulled a all-nighter, which they essentially did. You can see right here the graphic on the left, my little cursor's circling. It shows that they were on a flight. So they were supposed to catch a red eye out of the airport, and the plane got delayed and they didn't end up getting out till early the next morning. So our group of 10 actually didn't get any sleep. Some of them got a little bit of sleep. We had some fire on the we had some bands on the folks that went with them that were in charge of the group, so we were able to look at these. But these are the students, and this individual right here, you can see this is one individual, 25-year-old individual, was down there for 10 days, and none of his time He never did after that all-nighter from the airport. He never did recover. Never did. He spent 46% of his time in the 80 to 90, and then 36% in the 70 to 80, 15%. You get the picture here. I think you can see that. So even in young individuals, we think, oh, they're able to recover. They can do this. They're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. We actually see that if you don't get your 8 hours of sleep, you're not going to recover. And so you can see here, he got 2 hours that night at the airport, almost 3 hours, 5 hours the next night when they got to Florida, 6 hours the next night, 5 hours the next night. So I think this right here just drives home the fact of how important sleep is to us. So as I wrap up my data, I just want to give you some what I call best management practices for sleep. When we work with foresters, loggers, and others, we always talk about best management practices that we can take. And so for those of you out there that might be suffering from sleep or lack of sleep, or you've got a crew that you want to help out, so these are some applied things that we can actually do. The Center for Disease Control recommends 7 to 9 hours of sleep each day. As we get older, our sleep requirements get more. And that's in order to function at the highest level of effectiveness, physically as well as mentally. And I mentioned Dr. Matthew Walker earlier, and he's got this quote, and I just love, he's done this for his research. I just love to quote this. In the context of injury, there is no better risk mitigating insurance policy than sleep. So I want to repeat that because it's worth repeating. In the context of injury, there is no better risk mitigating insurance policy than sleep. So if you have sleep issues, and I've been doing this, like I said, with loggers, foresters, and wildland firefighters. We just gave a big talk to the IC over here in Idaho, and a lot of them wanted to know, what do we do? So I put together these BMPs. The biggest thing is don't watch the clock. Get rid of visible clock faces, anything that has light. Restrict your time in bed if you're having sleep issues. In other words, stay awake longer where we build up that sleep debt or that sleep pressure and it forces you to go to sleep. Try to avoid exercise because exercise raises our metabolic rate, it raises our body temperature, and it takes us a couple hours to cool down. And then one exposure, this is mainly for office workers, but 1 hour exposure to natural sunlight, that helps us keep our circadian rhythm in check. The human is developed on about a 24, 25 hour circadian rhythm. And if we don't have that sunlight, it can get thrown off. A hot bath. Out there on the fire line, you can't do this unless you're right there around the hot springs. But if you're at home, that relaxes you. It does heat your body up, but as the body temperature drops, you begin to feel sleepy. And then eating. There's not been a whole lot studied on this, but eating high carbs leads to less deep sleep and more awakenings. And I've been playing around with this myself as I wear this Ready Band and some of the others as well when we look at sleep, and I'm going to get into some other things as well. Avoid being too full or too hungry. Again, I just want to mention that I'm not a medical doctor, so if you have sleep issues, I just would advise you to go see your medical doctor. And you can Google all of this for sleep BMPs. One of the things, if you go get help, a sleep therapist is going to put you through cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, that long word there. But they're going to give you some sleep hygiene tips. And I'll give it to you right here. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, so seek advice if you have these issues, but reduce caffeine. And we say avoid caffeine 3 to 6 hours. Some people are more tolerant than others. Alcohol, I'll touch on alcohol and what that does to us. Reduce alcohol, reduce screen technology, try to sleep in a cool room. That can be difficult when you're on a south-facing slope out there in the wild and doesn't cool down as much at night. The single most effective best management practice for getting a good night's sleep is to establish regular bedtime and wake up hours. And I hear this all the time. Well, Randy, we're out there on the fire line and this is difficult. And I understand that, and I'll touch on that as well. Go to bed when you're sleepy. If you're at home, don't doze on the couch after work. Don't lie in bed awake. If you're not sleepy, get up and do something relaxing. And relaxing can help reduce those anxiety-provoking thoughts and worries. We need to unwind. We need to relax. As my wife says, she has to empty her pitcher every night. So those are some BMPs. So let me touch on sleeping pills. drives it home for me because my wife was in a head-on collision and spent 4 months over in Harborview, a lot of that time in intensive care, and I couldn't sleep. I stayed at the hospital those whole 4 months trying to sleep in a room, and my daughter's an emergency room nurse, and she called a doctor and got me an Ambien prescription, and I got addicted to those things. And then when I started reading the literature, I said, man, I got to get off this. And I was actually 3 years ago, I was wearing a ready band at the time, so I was able to look at my sleep, but I wasn't getting quality sleep. Sleeping pills don't improve our sleep. They just create that sedative feeling that we have to help us during sleep onset. We've got to have natural sleep for our memory connections. Ambien happens to unwire our brain cell connections by up to 50%, depending on the tolerance of the individual. In other words, it's a memory eraser. Research, time and time and time again. I read a great paper yesterday showing that those that, I think it was by the National Center for Health Research, research shows that those taking sleeping pills are 4 times more likely, 4.6 times more likely to die. We have a 60% increased rate of cancer. There was a study looking at, I think, well over 100,000 people in looking at those that taking sleeping pills, and for some reason it increases the risk of cancer by 60%. They're not quite sure yet. If a person takes 132 sleeping pills a year, they're more than 5.3 times. I hate to get morbid here, but this just talks about the kind of the bad and the ugly here. They're more than 5.3 times likely to die in the next 2.5 years. 18 pills a year, just 18 a year. Research has shown they're 3.6 times more likely to die. And again, those who use sleeping pills are less likely to remember less of the previous day, which applies to alcohol as well. And that can be up to a 40% loss of memory. Speaking of alcohol, and I know this can be a sensitive subject, but alcohol is a class of drugs called sedatives. They're a depressant, and it binds to the receptors in our brain that prevents the neurons from firing. But I always say, but Randy, it makes me more lively and social. Yeah, it does. That's because that sedation is in our frontal cortex, and that controls our impulse control area. So we're more likely to do things that we typically wouldn't do. And then we begin to feel sluggish and our brain gets sedated. And that's what helps us feel like we're going to fall asleep. It doesn't induce natural sleep. Alcohol is a diuretic. The liver metabolizes it really quick. Liver produces aldehydes and ketones. We wake up dehydrated, but because it's a diuretic, you usually wake up a couple hours later and need to go to the bathroom. But the main thing about alcohol is it prevents REM sleep, and that's the rapid eye movement, and that's the area where we dream. And if we don't ever get REM sleep, that'll eventually lead to hallucinations, delusions, and being disoriented. Now, REM sleep, what is it? That's the stage of sleep where people typically dream. The sleep cycles repeat over the course of the sleep stages of movement and without eye movement. Brain activity is the same as when we're awake. I'm going to speed up here so we can get done and get to some questions. We have 90-minute cycles between the REM, rapid eye movement, and the non-rapid eye movement, and that's where we have dreamless sleep. And I'll just go down through here. As you get older, you sleep more lightly and get less deep sleep. And aging is also linked to shortened times of spans of sleep, even though you need just as much. And this is where the body repairs and regrows tissue, builds bone, muscles, and strengthens the immune system. So we got to go through those 2 stages of sleep. And lastly, I want to touch on melatonin. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, but people have asked me about that. That's a natural hormone that's released in the body. It helps regulate our signal when we can sleep. Supposedly, supplementing with melatonin advances our sleep phase, helps us to go to bed earlier. I would say if you're going to do that, be careful because it's a vasoconstrictor. In other words, it can constrict our blood vessels and may pose a danger to those with predisposed to cardiovascular disease. So in summary, like I said, if you have sleep issues, seek medical advice or medical attention. And what we're finding so far, it's hard to draw definite conclusions. What's happening on the fire line, what's causing accidents and fatalities. I mentioned this is like an onion. There's a lot of layers to peel away. There's a lot of work yet to be done. We do know they're getting fatigued due to sleep loss. We don't know What we don't know is diet and hydration. We don't know if fatigue's related to that. I have a daughter-in-law that's working in this arena right here. I think she's going to find some encouraging results. She's with a different team, however, but they're looking at body composition, diet, and hydration and things like that. So we'll wait to see what they find out here. The next step, we're still collecting data. We're getting objective data now along with our subjective data. But the biggest thing I want to peel out is interventions. And the biggest one intervention, I hear a lot of guys out there on the line, guys and gals, say, I can't get 8 hours of sleep on the fire line. And some of them say, well, maybe if I'm spiked out. Trust me, I know I've been there. Just knowing you're fatigued is the first step that I tell the men and women I'm working with. Be aware of that fact. Stay vigilant and just know you're fatigued. You know, I coached football for over 10 years and I tell my linebackers, keep your head on a swivel. In other words, don't get blindsided. So just this self-awareness right here, self-awareness, know and understand that you're fatigued. You're going to wake up in the morning, be vigilant, stay vigilant. And just in summary, I like to say this isn't just an academic exercise and publication. And what I'd like to say is this is about saving lives. And I've started this quote, and I don't know if I read it somewhere, but we can replace homes, structures, and trees, but we can't replace lives. And we service our equipment. You see the guy filing his saw there, the person filing their saw. We service our equipment. Why don't we service our bodies? That's our most valuable piece of equipment. This is about saving lives and trying to prevent accidents. Like I said, I've got skin in the game, dog in the fight, so to speak. And I just want everyone to come home safely. And my parting words, all you ladies and men that fight fire out there, you're my heroes. Most of us are rushing out, getting the heck out of Dodge, evacuating fires, and you're running in to save resources and in some case structures. And so I salute you guys out there. But having said that, above all, stay safe out there if you're actually going out on the line this summer. And with that, we can take some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Randy, for that really informative presentation. So yeah, as Randy said, we'll open it up for questions now. If you have a question, again, you can type it into the question or chat pane on the webinar control panel. And we'll give folks a second to do that. But while we give them a second, Randy, if you wouldn't mind sending us the link to that podcast and then also your paper once it's published and any other resources you think are important, we'll make sure those get posted on the event page and where the recording will be posted. And I've had a few questions come in through the talk asking, they missed my initial announcement. The recording will be available within 48 hours. And if you're a registrant or attendee, you'll get an email with that link. And then we'll also share it widely on our website and elsewhere. So we will have a recording of this available for those of you who want to share it with your networks. So I'll work with Randy to get those resources up.
Yes, I'll get those to you.
Thank you. All right, so we do have some questions coming in. So and we won't be able to get through all of these. So that's why you'll see on the slide, Randy has posted here, he's kindly been kind enough to share his contact info. So if you had a question that we didn't get to, there's his email right there, but we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. Yes, so first question.
I'm sorry. I'd encourage folks to email me if they have a particular question. I'm happy to work with anyone.
Great. Well, we'll try to get through a few of these. First one, amazing validation for me as an MEDL and EMPF, and then to consider the effects of air pollution and food quality / vegetable consumption on top of fatigue and sleep deprivation. So my question is, can you really separate the variable of sleep? Will two other significant variables exist simultaneously?
That's a great question. And the question is, I haven't tried that yet, so I'm not sure. Hopefully I know there's other researchers out there that are looking at that, and I'm going to leave it. I know the University of Maryland just got a huge grant, and they're going to start looking at some of these other factors as well. So I guess the answer to that is I'm not quite sure. That's something I'd like to work towards at some point. I'll have to expand my team to do that. I do have a 2 exercise physiologists working with us on some other aspects of this. One happens to have a really good background in nutrition and diets, and so that could be something that we could start looking at. But I've written that down, and honestly, I don't know if I've even seen that in the literature. There may be something that exists out there, but that's like I said, this is like layers of an onion. There's a lot of layers to peel away to get down to that. And right now, we're just looking at sleep quality and quantity, and we actually are. So we've got our folks this year. We're going to try to figure out. It's hard to look at what they're actually eating. We had some hot shots last year that were actually figuring up, looking at what they were eating, and we haven't taken and done anything with that data yet, but we'll actually see. So we see if we can't compare that aspect of it with the sleep aspect of it. But thank you for that question.
Here's another one that adds another layer to your onion. Has there been research conducted, or is there a desire to continue this type of research, but for overhead functions like incident management teams?
Yes, well, I gave this to the IC team last week. We had about 120, maybe not that many. We had a bunch in the room, and they were standing outside, but that was the first thing that comes up. And so we're gonna try to outfit some of them. We get some of these big fires going this year, and we're gonna put some of these on those folks and just see, because that comes up. They're the ones that's working all night long in the tent trying to figure out what the plan of attack is for the next day. So that's great. Yeah, we do plan on hitting that one this season.
Great, thanks. Are you able to describe the quality of daytime sleep for wildland firefighters who work night or swing shifts?
Yes, we can actually look at that, and sleep is sleep. The specialist I've teamed up with Olympic athletes, she's been encouraging the Olympic athletes that they have nap rooms for the middle of the day. The problem is, wildland firefighters, if you're sleeping outside, you don't have a very good sleep environment. And so we actually haven't had any, well, we've had a few off fire, but as far as on fire, we haven't had any to look at as far as examining that kind of data. But yes, we can look at that.
Another question about your data. Does any of your data come from fire organizations that provide sleep facilities, such as they give the example of CAL FIRE?
Not yet. CAL FIRE has reached out to me and wants to be a part of this. And so I'm in negotiations with them right now to see how we can do that. But no, they want to know. A lot of them claim they'll come out on a fire and be out there 24 to 36 hours without any relief. So that's actually, they're probably one of the, well, we're working with quite a few agencies. You saw that early on, but that's one of the things I'd like to look at as well.
Great. I'm going to link a comment and a question here. Someone commented, we have firefighters work 14, 16-hour shifts, but the hospital where my daughter works will not let anyone work more than 4 12-hour shifts in a row. Both are occupations with severe consequences if mistakes are made. Maybe it's time to limit days in a row worked for firefighters. And another person made the, I think, rhetorical question, if good sleep is the best risk insurance policy, should we pay wildland firefighters to sleep? I don't know if you make comments on that.
Well, I can comment on that. I've been talking, like I said, Region 1, 4, and 6 health and safety specialists and directors. We've been having these conversations, and that's, being a non-agency person, I can speculate. If they're going to lay the money out there, my thought is we can pay them as an intervention. And the folks agree with this. They agree with it. It's going to take a paradigm shift in the way we do things, though. The folks, if they're fatigued, and this is just it. I tell everybody there's not going to be a Randy Brooks rule that's going to pull you off the fire line and keep you from getting your overtime pay. I don't want that to ever happen. What I would like to see happen is when you're fatigued, you can hold back and still get paid your fire money. Like I said, that's going to take a pretty good paradigm shift. but it's being talked about.
Okay, great. Well, we're gonna do, we have one more question just fly in, so we'll do one more and then we'll wrap up. Many of the occurrence numbers for accidents show an increase over time. Have you correlated this with number of man hours? If more people are working, then maybe the number of accidents per man hours is decreasing?
That's a good question, and I have not. We've been trying to look for that data. That's a great grad student question right there. So if we could get that data, yeah, more man hours, more people. We haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, they had the comment it would allow the data to be standardized. If more people are working, then it's possible there's a greater chance of an accident to
Oh,
occur.
yeah, 100% agreed.
All right, well, thank you so much, Randy. We have a couple other just requests for if you would be willing to share that dream research you mentioned with me. I can post that on the webpage too. And someone asked if you'd be willing to share your slides. If you're willing to, we can post a PDF of your slides also, so
Oh,
you can think about that.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm not, yeah, nothing I've got here is, like I said, we need to get this information out there. Self-awareness is the first thing. And so the more people we have looking at this, the more interested, the better off we are.
Okay, great. So I'll get all those resources from you and we'll make sure they're up before we send out the link to the recording so people have all that available to them. I really appreciate that. And then again, Randy has kindly provided his contact info on the left side of the screen. So if you have any follow-up questions, and then if you have any follow-up questions related to Northern Rockies Fire Science Network or suggestions for events, activities, webinars, you'll see that email contact info on the right side of your screen. And finally, as you close the webinar, a brief survey will pop up. We really appreciate and value feedback on this and potential future webinar topics. And if you have any other questions, again, feel free to email that email provided on the screen at any time. And I want to thank everyone for attending and for your active participation today. And Randy, thank you again so much for taking the time to share your work with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It was my privilege. Thank you,
All right.
everybody, for attending. And like I said, stay safe this summer.
Yes, yes, thank you. That's a good closing message. So with that, I'll wish everyone a great rest of their day. And thank you again.